Hi, Sam. How are you?
Hi, Carol. I'm great, thanks. It's good to finally meet you.
It's really nice to meet you too over Zoom all the way across the world. What time
It,
is it where you are?
it's very cool. It's about 20 minutes to 10 in the morning. So, yeah, it's a
Nice.
very reasonable time for me. How about you?
That's awesome. It's 5 p.m. Over here, so also great at the end of my day, just finishing up. Well, I guess we should maybe jump in, and I'd love to hear about you and your career and what you do on a daily basis.
I'm born and raised in Adelaide and got interested in filmmaking when I was in high school. And crazy or not, decided to see how I would go pursuing that as a career, and it worked out really well. I studied a creative arts degree at Flinders University in screen studies. And then I was lucky enough to land a role in a big production company here, probably the biggest in Adelaide at the time, Kojo. And I worked there for 7 years as kind of the traditional career path, starting as an assistant editor and then an editor, and then eventually kind of branched out into animation and color grading. And eventually I was kind of a jack of all trades on lots of their kind of corporate video work. And I had some great mentors there at Kojo. And so I left there in around 2016. I wanted to try to get some more work on some feature films, and I was an assistant editor on a film. And inevitably, my contacts drew me back from the eastern states back to Adelaide, and I ended up throwing my chips in with a colleague, and we set up our own business here by the name of Beyond Content. And over the last 4 years, that's gone from strength to strength. And we work across a whole variety of stuff, from branded content to TV commercials to feature films, feature film service work. I color grade a lot of documentaries. And we've got our own slate of projects that are in development and that we're trying to get off the ground. So it's been a very kind of I guess, varied career, largely in post-production. I've also dabbled in directing from time to time, so that gets me excited on certain projects, but certainly behind the edit desk or the color desk is my comfort zone, and I just love it. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's
How about
awesome.
you, Carol?
Yeah, so I think that it's more common than folks think to have that, sort of varied career as you sort of go along and forge your own path. And there's not really straight lines. And I definitely I relate to that a lot in your career. And mine, has been maybe a little bit lots different, but lots the same. So I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, here in the States, famous for the green chili, and Breaking Bad now was shot in New Mexico. So a lot of people recognize things from my hometown because of Breaking Bad, which is very odd for me. But I studied film and computer science at university, and sort of got into the animation and visual effects space in that. That's sort of like kind of what I wanted. At first, I thought I wanted to be an animator, and I took a few classes in that early in my college career, and realized very quickly that that was not what I wanted to do. So I went in a more general film path, and kind of supplemented that with computer science, because I've always loved both the tech and the art side. And I think that the mix of both and how they complement each other is honestly today what makes movie making so awesome. Because you can't do one without the other almost at this point. And so that's always been fun. But I graduated, and my compositing professor from college actually gave me my first job. They had started their own boutique visual effects studio in Albuquerque, and they hired me as a generalist, basically to do whatever needed doing. So I did everything from, actually doing some compositing on a couple commercials to doing motion graphics for some commercials they were working on, to being an animation coordinator on Smurfs 2, which was my first feature film credit, which to this day makes me laugh.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's a really funny credit to have, but it was a great project. I learned so much doing that. I helped write the code for their render farm to make that all work. And so it was a bunch of different stuff, and really, it gave me a great sort of intro into just jumping in and just learning what you need to learn. And from there, I got a job at Industrial Light and Magic in San Francisco. So I moved to San Francisco. The job was entry level technical assistant. So I was render wrangling and moving data around, data wrangling, ingesting a lot of the footage from editorial, from the polls, so that the artists could use them, making sure that everything was doing backups and finding things from the archives the artists wanted back from a previous production, and then also writing little scripts and things and tools to make the artist's life easier. And I really liked that. I am a big advocate of starting from the bottom, because you get the opportunity to learn from everybody that's been there a long time. And so that's what I did. I learned about all the different departments in visual effects, and what that kind of looked like at a big studio. Because ILM, I went from like a mom and pop, like a very small, like just, take whatever you do and make it work. We do all kinds of stuff, to ILM, which, does big budget feature films. That is what they do. So it was really interesting to see the differences between the two. I worked for ILM for 6 years, and it was there that I got introduced to color science. Previous to ILM, I didn't know what color science was, or that it was a thing that was necessary to pretty much everything in the film industry. But I had great mentors there. I sort of fell into it a little bit accidentally, based on some tools I was writing at the time. And the color scientist sort of took me under his wing and taught me and helped me get a start, and then did what all good mentors do and left the company.
Sure.
And so I took his role, and without a lot of experience or knowing anything about anything really. But it was a great way to learn and do, and I made my way. I did that for 3 years at ILM before transitioning to work at Netflix, which is where I am now. And I work now on a team called the Creative Technologies at Netflix, which does research and development and standards documentation for all of the Netflix original productions globally. So everything from our team handles like how to master in HDR, to what cameras can you use to shoot a Netflix production, to how do we work in all these different softwares and get accurate color representation, to lots of other different things. I work on a lot of open source projects these days, which is very fun for me. And yeah, our team does a lot.
I think I've been lucky enough to read one of your HDR technical documents. I might be working on a Netflix show next year, so yeah, it was a really good read, actually. I don't know if everybody would think that, but
yeah, they are definitely for a specific audience, but
yes.
we try and do what we can to keep up with the latest tech and make sure that all of our productions have the tools and the information they need to make. We really feel like technology should increase your ability to make amazing art, not inhibit it. And a lot of the time, tech can just feel like so much work. Like a lot of these new things that you have to do to make things work well just feel like a lot of work, and they shouldn't. It should be a tool at your disposal that you want to use, not that you have to use. So
absolutely, that's a beautiful way to phrase it. Can we kind of flow on from here? And I want you to answer for me, what is color science?
Color science means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. If you asked someone that studied color science in school, which is a thing you can do at a university, not many universities, but it's the thing you can do. Color science usually covers everything, like it starts from the very beginning around how our eyes and our brains work and perceive color and how all of that connects in. It also connects into physics and how light works. And, is a lot of those things that you learn in, high school physics continued on from that to how then our brain perceives that. So it covers a lot of that stuff. And then it can get into a lot of the more traditional color science sides cover your more physical aspects of color in your life. So printing, clothes, textiles, paint, things like that you have maybe something that you're making digitally in, say, like Illustrator or Photoshop or whatever program you're making it in, that then has to become a real life object. And you expect those colors to match and you expect that to work. And it wasn't always so involved in technology. Color science, I think if you ask like from the beginning, it would probably be arts and mixing paints and pigments and how all of that sort of works together. And but now it's primarily, how do we take what's digital and how do we tell a computer what color is, and also tell the devices what color is. And for film, it stays pretty digital now. It used to be in and out of film, and that's a whole different kind of conversation,
like celluloid
around
film, like
celluloid. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, like, yes, film development and processing and all of the things that went into that. But once we passed that, there's a whole tons of history about how all of that sort of developed, and a lot of the processes that were used on that and the conventions that we use now in the digital world were developed when they were working on film by Kodak and the labs in New York, and we still use a lot of those conventions today. Just now it's all digital. So for the film side of color science, the entertainment media side of color science, we stay in the digital world. We're not printing anything. We're not making physical assets. We're making digital assets. So it's, how do you get things once, how does a camera sensor work? And it's, how does the camera see color? All the way through to a visual effects artist that's working in a specific program, to the color bay where you sit, and how all these things connect together, and how all the math and science connect to create the art at the end. I'd love to hear from you, like, how would you describe a colorist? What does a colorist do?
When people ask me that, I just say, it's manipulating an image like you might with a still photograph. It's brightness, it's contrast, it's color balance, it's mood. And I guess you can break these things down into technical, like the technical side, where you might have had a reverse shot filmed at different times of day. The sun's going down in a scene, and then you've got two people who are supposed to be having a dialogue with each other in the final product. You're going to need to actually balance those light levels to make it look like they were having that conversation at the same time of day, even though the sun was going down when they were filming it. So color continuity, that is. And so there's the technical side of matching cameras, even with certain lookup tables or LUTs, is a good way to start, and then making sure that skin tones match, so that it's that visual continuity, much like editing, I suppose, in that most times you don't actually want people to notice the edit. You want it to be this continuous flow. So it's the same with color, but I tend to think of that as my first pass in grading. I tend to do a continuity pass to try and get everything looking right, and then that's where almost that the technical side of my brain is nicely satisfied, and then I can get into the fun creative stuff. And that's where color grading, you work with mood and feeling and drama, and you can cool scenes down, or you can warm them up. And then, more specific secondary grading, like drawing people's attention to someone's face or certain objects in the scene. You know, it's almost like looking at a painting. What do you want to draw the viewer's eye first and foremost, and can you subtly tweak the light in the scene? Yeah, it's all very subtle, but it's amazing how sometimes when I was first starting out, I thought, oh, look, this looks pretty good with a light. I don't need to worry about grading it shot by shot. It'll be fine. And then you go, okay, well, this job we do have time for a bit of color grading. You know, like if it's a corporate video or something, it's not quite as critical. So then you kind of do a grade, and then you do the before and after, and you go, oh my God, how was I even looking at those ungraded images? How was I even thinking that I could get away with not grading this? Would you say that the term color science, is that the technical side of color grading, or would you say that there's creativity in color science as well?
I think that there's a type of creativity in all work, though, and it's about, you know, how you approach your job. A lot of things, though. Yes, if people ask me, when I tell people what I do, a lot of the time, the easiest way that I describe it is I make tools and algorithms and math for visual effects artists and colorists to use, and to make their, you know, for them to be able to do color grading. Because a lot of the time, and I'm sure you've had your career confused with a lot of other jobs too, is most of the time when I say color science, people are like, oh, so you do color grading, you grade that, you make the colors on the films. And I say, nope, sorry, one level down from that. And I talk about, you know, research and development and tools, and you know, it's a lot more on the technical side, engineering, to make the work that you do possible.
I think when I tell people that I'm a colorist, they think I'm a hairdresser. Well, I'm definitely, I'm no
as
good
fun
with
as
hair.
that would be. As fun as that would be. No.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe there's a greater awareness in you know, the environment in which you work of what a colorist is, or a color grader, you know. So that's interesting that people think that you're a color grader when you're you're actually a color scientist. So I'm learning a lot today too, which is really, really good.
That's always, I think that's like the most consistent part of any of our jobs, is we're constantly learning, because everything is constantly changing.
Everything that you described before in your career and the way your career grew, I can, you know, feel parallels with that. And I think as long as you're just, you know, you have an open mindset and you're willing to take on any challenge, you know, you find your way, don't you? Our career journeys aren't necessarily linear, but if you've got a good, you know, work ethic, and you can get on with people, and you're passionate, and you just want to be working in film, I think you'll probably land on your feet. Would you say that's true?
I think it is. It really is a lot more about, it's an industry that you're in because you're passionate about it. It's a little different than, I don't want to always, you know, talk about money, but it's not necessarily an industry you get into to make a lot of money.
I say that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it seems like that from the outside, maybe a little bit, but you know, it's definitely one primarily based in passion and storytelling, and whatever that storytelling looks like we were talking about before, is like that creativity exists in all of our craft. And I think that anybody, even on the engineering side, who, you know, just your most like very structured software engineer that works in the film industry is passionate about film and about that creativity and loves film. And there's a reason that we're, you know, in this industry versus going to work at a, you know, a bigger tech company, or in finance, or, you know, and like whatever you want to do. And it's very passion based.
We've got to love it, don't we? Otherwise we'd be mad to be doing it. So.
Yeah, very much so. And I think a lot of people would say that about their jobs and their industry, and that, you know, but I do think that it might be slightly more true with ours.
And I think it's probably changed over the years, like with any industry as well. So, you know, decades ago, it would have been a more linear pathway, whereas now it's actually an advantage to you know, broaden your skill set a little, perhaps, you know, when you're certainly when you're first starting out, you know, dabble in animation, dabble in coding, dabble in, you know, and you'll get there. So yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like you were mostly self-taught to learned on the job. Like, did you have any formal education around this, or would you say it's mostly just been
Well,
learn
look,
as you go?
I had a wonderful time studying at university. It wasn't a film college. A lot of people went in there expecting it to be a film college, but I kind of went in with an open mind and really, I guess, soaked up all of the theory, the screen theory. So learning a lot about Hollywood cinema and Asian cinema, and you know, that was the best part of uni for me. And then it was a really kind of solid introduction to practical filmmaking as well. But it was very much general, like it was very general. So it wasn't until I got into the industry and decided, okay, I'm going to pursue post-production, that you know, my knowledge really expanded further.
Yeah.
No, it's and that's probably true of anyone's transition from education to work. I suppose you learn a lot on the job, and I think in film too, or certainly in post. I guess my perception when I was studying was that I'll go into post because that means I can spend all the time I like getting something right. I don't have to get it right on set. I don't have to get it right on the day I can spend. But that is not a reality. You know,
I was gonna
like
say, how's that worked
it's
out for you?
always limited by time and budgets, and you know, I guess for that reason, it's also hard to you know, have time for formal training or sitting down with a mentor. You know, I've in my experience, mentorship, both as a mentor and a mentee, has very much been like, oh, I've got 5 minutes, I can kind of guide this person in the right direction, or I can give them my opinion on something, or I can show them how a certain tool works. And so it's been very piecemeal. And you know, that's been great. I think that's necessary, but also a lot of it is teaching yourself and a drive to learn and research. So that's where, you know, we could talk about R&D, I suppose, with technology always changing, and
Yeah.
quite often on my phone at night reading blogs or watching YouTube videos about software updates or, you know, HDR technology, because if you hear someone in your industry mention HDR and you don't know what it is, then you go home and you research it, so that next time you have a conversation, you know what, you know what people are talking about, and you know what you're talking about. So it's
Yeah.
very much that drive, I think, to always be learning and teaching yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. So as a colorist, like how much time do you think you actually really devote to that research and development of your tool and your craft? And is it really challenging to, you know, for me, that's my whole job, is making the tools and doing the things, and then pushing them out and having people help test them and do stuff. Is that how does that work for you? And when you're on projects, and how do you fit that all in to keep up with it all?
Look, it is time consuming, and a lot of it is kind of after hours. And I think it's easier when you can enjoy it, you know. So if you just find a moment to watch a YouTube video, it doesn't feel like study, I suppose. But also going into every job, you know, I guess one thing I love about this job is it's very left brain, right brain. You know, it's the creative side and it's the technical side. And I'm always keen to, I guess, discover efficiencies in my workflow. So as nerdy as that sounds, I'm a big nerd, and I own it. But, you know, kind of I might develop or discover or come upon a way of making things easier the next time round. So a lot of tools are incredibly expansive, and you don't jump in having read the 2,000-page manual from start to finish and knowing everything about the tool. You start with what you know, and you learn as you go on the job, and you can get faster if you've got that open mindset and you stumble upon something in the tool and you go, oh, okay, maybe that's something that might help me next time. And then you find a moment after hours to go, okay, what does this do? Oh, okay, great. So the next big job I go into, I'm going to set my project up in a different way. And I think that's actually going to save me some time. So, and I guess, you know, that will always be the case because technology is always changing. So yeah, you just kind of have to be on
That's
the front
awesome.
foot as best you can.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I'm curious, like from your end as a colorist, like what do you look for in like an accurate color setup? Like what does that mean to you?
Okay, so I guess I've had a lot of fun this year building a color suite, which is the room that I'm in right now. You're kind of looking in the reverse direction, but yeah, it's all about, as you mentioned earlier, perception is a huge thing, and that differs between everybody's perception. I'm sure most people have heard of you know, color blindness and how that affects people's color vision, but we all see color in a slightly different way. And so that's worth noting in the first instance. But then, you know, it's what you were talking about before, Carol, in that you're actually managing the pipeline of color all the way through to the end. And so, and you only have certain control over that in your environment as well. So once an image leaves your environment, you don't have control over it really. So you just have to make sure that you're not doing anything or working in a way that's counter to what you expect, I suppose. So when I was setting up this room, I was looking into things like neutral grays. So it's good to make sure that you don't have too many bright objects in the room. That's actually going to impact your vision when you're grading. You can see there's some like greenery, plants, things behind me, because the room was very much looking like, you know, a room for vampires. It was just black, grey, and that suits me well most of the time, but I was feeling like it needed a little bit of colour. And so what I've done is I've put the colour in the back of the room, and in the front of the room I've tried to keep things fairly neutral, so the way that I'm looking and the way that I'm grading, it's not going to be affected by those colours. And it might sound like it's being very, I guess, overly pedantic, but if you've ever seen any of those, I guess, optical illusions online where you've kind of got different colors, or you've got a strip of color that looks like it's a gradient, but it's got other things around it, and you realize that the band of color in the middle is the same. It's the same block of color, solid
Just surrounded
color,
by different colors.
and you can see how it impacts your vision. So it's really good to be able to neutralize your space for that reason. And then also there's it's good to have like a bias light behind your television. So that's, I guess it creates this halo of light behind the TV to give you that kind of neutral background. And that helps improve your contrast perception when you're looking at your monitor. And yeah, I guess it's about having kind of neutral lighting in your suite as well, so that if you've got I've got lights on the walls here, and that's, you know, it's high quality light, and it's white light is made up of a spectrum of color. So if you can get as neutral light as you can. Now I'm getting into very specific detail, but I guess I've had a lot of fun setting it up. So
that's great.
That's good. And then, you know, you can get professional calibration as well on your equipment, and then you feel like you've done everything that you can to keep the color pipe consistent in terms of the hardware. And then, you know, we could start talking about the software as well, and making sure that you've got the right LUTs on cameras, so that you know, that's your starting point for a grade, and it makes the colors of that specific make and model of camera look like it should look, at least as a starting point, and then that helps you to match color. And I've had very, you know, interesting times with clients where I've done a grade and sent it out, and it's been with a lot of remote work these days, and they've sent it back to me saying it looks wrong, it looks different, even to the point of sending me screenshots of their color controls in a different you know, software package,
Oh
shadows,
my gosh.
midtones. It's like,
Oh my
okay,
gosh.
that's a bit rude.
That's a
but
lot.
but
Yeah.
it's, you know, like it's hard because that you almost need to be really sure in how you've got your room set up, and also convincing them that what they're looking at might not be fully accurate compared to the way you've got it set up in your
Yeah.
room. So
Yeah. Yep.
yeah.
I think a lot of the things that I like to talk about in this is that, our eyes, like you were talking about, they're adaptive. They change based on your situation. If you're in a light room, in a dark room, looking at really saturated colors, looking at neutral things, looking at different types of light, they change. Like your eyes and your brain are constantly interacting to prevent, to give you the best viewing experience possible. And we always, you do the thing where you have people look at a really bright light and then look away and look at it and watch and you could feel, you could see your eyes change what you're looking at. And it's sort of like taking the brightness up and down on your phone, in a way. But it's, your eyes are constantly seeing a lot more dynamic range contrast, like the amount of light to dark that we can see at one time is so much more than any camera can capture or any display can represent. And the interesting thing about that, so what we have to do then in order to be able to do our visual storytelling is figure out a way to get the best thing possible, the closest representation of what our eyes can see on a daily basis, what our reality is. And like you were saying, that's different for every person. If you sat, like, a lot of the current color models that we rely on in color science now are actually based on, one, things that were done back in 1936, and two, only based on maybe 100 participants. So what we call accurate color is based on such a small number of people. And really the reality is it's probably a much wider range of what is green will mean very different things to a lot of different people.
I do have to ask you here, what color is the dress? Is it white and gold, or is it blue and black?
It depends on how you light it.
Exactly. And how your brain interprets it.
Yeah. And it's an interest that one was really fun. I loved having people talk about that. And that's a great, like, sort of visual of all of the things coming together that we're talking about, both what your brain is trying to do and what the phone was trying to do that captured that image, and what the lights were doing to those colors in that scene. And it was a huge, just meet in the middle of all of these things that went not wrong, but definitely tricky for your brain to interpret. And it's interesting to see what people see at first, and then see if they can see a different thing if you tell them that it's actually a black and blue dress, and watch them see it then. And that was fascinating for sure. But I look at it too, and then, so what a lot of my job is then, okay, so we see these things with our eyes, the way that we see, and that's reality, or whatever our reality is. And how do we recreate that digitally with very fixed things? Because when you talk about a camera, it has fixed capabilities. When you talk about a display, it has fixed capabilities. But at least they're known quantities. So we can, like you were talking about, calibrate a display to output a very specific set of colors, a very specific way at a specific white point. And you have to do that regularly because displays get old and they drift and they do weird things, and you might change a setting accidentally and then go back. And so a lot of it, human error is fun, but you can set it and you can tell it what to do, and produce reports that it's doing this thing to an accurate degree. And so a lot of the displays that you work on as a colorist, they're made with extremely high quality, and a lot of that goes into the predictability of the materials that are used to make it, so they can represent color accurately for a long time and not degrade over time, and not change and drift a lot. And so that's where people ask, why are these displays so expensive compared to just a normal computer monitor that I'd get off the shelf? That's why. A lot of the reason has to do with reliability engineering on that. And it's the same with cinema cameras. You know, they capture, they have a camera sensor in there that isn't, it's basically like the camera's eye, but it can only capture a certain set of colors, a certain wavelength, certain spectrum. And it, what it does with those things is unique to each camera. And it's really this cool tool that when a director of photography, cinematographer is picking their camera, a lot of them have favorites for that reason of like, this camera captures color a certain way to their eye. And it's a really cool thing, but it's limited. But again, it's known. So you can take what a camera captures and that's a known thing. And so then it's about what you were talking about. If it goes, once you capture that image and it goes from department to department and different people are doing work on it, you have this, it started as this known quantity. And by the time it reaches the color bay, for you to do your work, it should have that same quality and those same, it shouldn't have been messed with unnecessarily. And a lot of the work that we do is to track that and keep that color consistency and accuracy through all of the different people that touch and look at an image through the whole process of making a film. And I totally relate to what you're saying around our remote work lifestyle, making that a lot harder these days. Because, you know, it used to be that, you know, a director or a director of photography would be there with you in the edit bay and in a color grading suite, physically looking at the same display that you're looking at, so you don't have this ping pong of different displays and accuracy. And so it was a big project for my team, early 2020, or like when it's all, you know, 2020, to write a bunch of documentation around standards about what we were going to do for our productions. What displays should you get? Can you get your hands on an iPad Pro? Like, you know, can't, you know, and how we're going to export media for folks to review, and what programs work accurately and well and reliably for you to review this media, and what are the caveats to what
That's huge. That's
we can
really
and can't do.
what a big job, but so important.
It took our whole team, you know, it took our whole team pretty much dropping everything that we were working on, expecting to be working on. But it's been amazing. But I obviously, I really wish this last year hadn't been the way that it's been, obviously for many, many reasons. But if there is silver lining that comes out of it, we've made leaps and bounds in advancements of being able to represent color accurately in remote locations that we never, the whole industry never would have probably made for years. So it's amazing what humans can do when there's a real need to get it done.
And I've heard that, you know, during a crisis, a global crisis, you know, technology does accelerate in a way. Innovation accelerates. I don't know why I need to do more reading about it, but I guess it makes sense. You kind of just have to make the most of a lousy situation, I guess. How many people are in your team, Carol?
So my direct team is our imaging team. There are 7 of us, but we are part of a bigger team, the creative technology team. Probably is about 50 globally, and we have different specialties within those teams. So we have a sound team, and we have you know, a display engineering team, and we have more of like a physical infrastructure kind of team, like building review rooms and the theaters and stuff like that. And then we have a workflows team, which are like our sort of boots on the ground with productions, like being on calls with the post team, and talking about specifications and talking through technical questions around what cameras should we shoot on, or if they have, like being that resource for production. So they're all of that fits under a team. We also have a virtual production section of our team because that's new and fun.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah.
So, cool.
Yeah.
That sounds really exciting. That's great.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Although Zoom calls can be arduous and not as fun in person, I guess it's possibly brought the world closer, you know, in a way. If your team's spread out all over the world, have you had more collaboration with them in the last few years?
honestly, I think that it's really brought our team closer. Yeah, have our global colleagues all over the place, and I hope that that's another positive that's come out of this, is we've learned how to more effectively collaborate because we're all remote now. You know, none of us are in person together, and so we have to make the best of a really challenging situation and figure out new ways to collaborate, and to communicate. And hopefully, you know, as we sort of move into a more hybrid, that, you know, hopefully soon there'll be possibilities of being able to be back in an office for some people, that will keep a lot of those things that have made life better in some ways for our international colleagues, like their work life, a little bit better. So yeah. It's a kind of a big question of like, this last year has been crazy, and our jobs, even without the world the way that it's been the last year, are incredibly mentally and physically taxing. And so I think it's kind of important to talk about how you take care of yourself so you can do good work. I don't think it's talked about enough, how you maintain. So I'd love to hear about some of your strategies and how you think about that.
Gosh, I think, I think for me, I've always been a bit of a workaholic, and so, and I look, I'm really lucky in the part of the world in which I live, and the work has managed to be pretty consistent. But I think it's just been some more subtle background stuff for me, you know, all of the news cycle, and I think it's worn on me in more subtle ways than a lot of people. So I almost don't feel like I'm you know, in a position to complain, but perhaps others are in my position too, where I think it's just really important to keep in check, you know, your own self-care and mental health, and make sure that you are taking time away from work and taking time, you know, to not think about, you know, the pandemic or about work. And yeah, I guess my thing is I'm always looking at screens, especially in this industry. We're always looking at screens. And so I've had to make a conscious effort to get away from screens and go for walks and do yoga and try to, just be more present, I suppose, and more present in my own little world, rather than being connected to everything that's going on in the larger world as well. So that's me. How about you?
Yeah, I relate to a lot of that. I think that it's huge, especially like working from home and not having the distinction between routine of office and home. This is when you stop work, you know, kind of a deal. You have this action of leaving an office, leaving that thing behind. So for me, it's felt a lot like it's constantly with me, even more than it already was. Like I always had work email on my phone, and work, you know, in Slack and chat or whatever on my phone for as long as I can remember. So there's always been some element of it that you have to work to maintain balance of, but this has been definitely a whole new level. But honestly, actually, I've come to kind of really like enjoy a lot of some of the little bits of freedom that it brings in some ways to my personal life. Like you were talking about walks and things like that, and I've really been enjoying being able to have a little bit more ownership over my schedule. And being able to, if I have a break in meetings or things like that, lots of meetings in a day, sometimes I'm sure you're in the same boat. Time zones can make your life a little bit crazy, and sometimes I'll start my day at 7 a.m. with meetings, and so sometimes at 11 I'll go and take a walk, and because that's when I have a break in meetings, or I'll do some other form of exercise, and or sometimes it's later in the afternoon, it's like 3 p.m. or something like that, and that's when I take a break and go and do something that's not on a screen, and not attached, and get outside. Has been a huge thing for me. I'm lucky to live in San Francisco now, that it, you know, is a nice city to walk around and look at and be around. So I feel very fortunate in that. So again, it's sort of same as you, as I don't honestly feel like I have a lot to complain about, but It's consistent. It has to be, for me, purposeful. I definitely can get into a zone of just slamming through lots of stuff and not thinking about what I'm doing to myself, actually. You get so invested in a project and so invested in what you're working on. And you don't see the damage that it's doing until sometimes it's too late.
No, that's so true. Yeah. And I totally relate to that physical separation between work and home, and I've been there before, and it's so easy just to fall into the trap that you just work around the clock because you can and it's there. And it's that's
so it's a lot for me, just purposeful. It just has to be purposeful. I have to constantly make myself think about it and plan for it and do it, because otherwise I won't.
That's a really great tip, actually, isn't it? Yeah.
So it's been, I think we'll keep getting hopefully better at that. And I love the focus on it nowadays. I think that there's a lot more attention being put on it from a lot of workplaces. A lot of different companies are finally realizing the value of having employees that are in a good space mentally and physically.
Absolutely.
You just do better work when you're taking care of yourself. And that can mean working less hours. And you may do better work working less hours. And that's a thing that I had to learn early in my career. I was like so proud of my 80-hour, 90-hour weeks crunching on a project. And I look back on that and it's like, I wasn't doing good work. Like, what's right?
Yes. Yeah.
So
no, absolutely. One thing I wanted to ask you earlier, if you don't mind me backpedaling a little, is why bother with color if you can't control it once it leaves your own environment? Like,
I think that a lot of that, it just has to do with the art and the craft of, respecting the intention of the person who came before you working on this. So you can track it all the way down the line. Your screenwriter had this vision, and this director of photography worked with their set designer to bring this to life. And they had a vision, and they captured something that they were seeing, and that they decided was that looked the best that they could make it look on the day that they shot it. Or if you're in animation, the artists that are creating the storyboards and the original concept art, it goes all the way back to that of, there's so much work that goes into every person's part of their job, and color is essential to that. Even if you're making a black and white film, you're still making huge color decisions around the contrast and tone of what does white mean? What is white? What is black? And those are not static things. You look at we use Roma as an example a lot. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it was black and white. It's a beautiful film, and they shot it that way intentionally, and it wasn't shot in color. They modified a red camera to shoot black and white. It was lovely, but they had to do a ton of work on it. Obviously, ton of color grading, so much work on that. So much work in the visual effects to make all of that kind of come together. And color is, like we were talking about, it's how we see the world. We see this in our form of color, and so there's no getting around that. This is a way that, when you look at something as a non-professional in our industry, people know when the color isn't right on something. They know. You look at it and you're like, that looks weird. It looks weird. And maybe they don't know exactly what's wrong, but it's so easy to pop someone out of the story, of just getting involved in the story and all these things like that by issues. And so I have a lot of passion for the work that we do in in every area can kind of talk about the same thing, but your color follows you every step of the way. And So we all have, like, there's huge responsibility in every department to do everything that we can to maintain the creative intent, is what we call it at Netflix, the creative
Great.
intent of
Yeah,
the people that came before you,
that's
and
beautiful.
after you, like, and set up the people
Yeah,
after you for success too, because it's a team.
that
So
really encapsulates it well. I mean, I'm glad you had that answer, because if you couldn't answer my question of like why bother, I would have just left. Like, what are we even doing?
whatever. And sometimes sometimes it feels a lot about that. We talk so much about these little things that this quick time, just like the blacks are slightly lifted. You're viewing this quick time on your Mac, and it's just the director saying just the blacks look wrong, and it's like minuscule, and sometimes you're thinking, why does it matter? Like, but it does. It really, really does. And every little bit matters. If someone is seeing it, if they are seeing the difference, then it's enough to matter. Some differences are so small that they're not able to be perceived. And you can talk in the ends of days about, we try really hard to be bit accurate and very, very precise. And even, there should be no differences if we can do in an ideal world. Obviously, there's always going to be small ones. You compress a raw file to an H.264, you're going to have differences in your color. There's nothing we can do about that, but we do our best to make them as imperceptible as possible. So
Indeed. But also the fact that we can control continuity of color in our environment, even if it leaves and goes onto a different screen that's out of our control, we can make sure that it feels really consistent. And also, I guess, do the best we can and know that it looks as best as we can do it within our control. And then if we go home and look at it on our TV that we've calibrated, or if someone's a real kind of film fan at home who cares almost as much as us about color, then the director's creative intent and the team's creative intent is preserved. So yeah,
absolutely. That's the goal. That's all we want.
Right. Yeah.
I love that question of what's the best piece of advice that you've been given that's sort of stuck with you in your career, or is it just advice you follow that you just don't know where it's from, a mantra or something like that? I can go first if you want.
Please let me think about that. I've got lots of little bits of information that I've been fed throughout my career, but nothing, like, no main one that stands out. How about you?
I think the main one for me, and it's been a hard one, and it's one that I have to constantly, I think the reason I don't forget it is because it's constantly, I have to work on it, because we're wired a little bit as humans to not really want to think this way, but to not be afraid to say, I don't know. And I think, in this industry, especially if you're moving up and you're starting somewhere entry level and you want to get somewhere and you want to learn, you're never going to be able to do that necessarily as easily if you're not willing to admit when you don't know something. And it's not just a giving up kind of thing. It's I don't know that. Let me go research it and learn about it and get back to you. Or, I don't know, do you have a second to explain this to me? Do you have time to chat about it? I'd love to learn more. But there's been a lot of instances where my life would have been a lot easier if I just would have come out with the fact that I said I don't know, instead of maybe making something up that turned out to be wrong, or just kind of saying nothing and then frantically researching and then or avoiding the email for a couple days, and making people irritated while I figured out the answer to these questions. A lot of it, I mean, I guess you could call it honesty in a way, but it's something I have to constantly work at. And I think that if more people were just, we all can't know everything. There's a reason we have specialties. There's a reason that we're in the positions that we're in, and also that we should always be learning in the positions that we're in, and we're never going to get to a spot where we know everything. And if we do, that's really boring. And so that's been a thing. And I think that even too, as women in this industry, it can be challenging to say I don't know, because you're surrounded by a lot of people that aren't like you, and it's a thing, but it helps. It's helped me a lot to
That's
to
a
learn
really
and to grow.
beautiful piece of advice, I think, especially from someone in your position. I think that's wonderful, because so much of the rhetoric that I've heard growing up is fake it until you make it. Say yes now and figure out how to do it later. And I guess I wear the other hat of being a business person, and I think those are kind of lessons that you get drilled into you. But also, honesty has always been a policy for me, and I feel like there are less complications if you're just upfront about things, and I also think that a lot of people can probably see through you if you're lying and you say you know how to do something. Maybe it doesn't feel
Yep.
like that to you, but I feel like there are some people that is their strategy. And yeah, I think I'd prefer to subscribe to your strategy, Carol. I think that's good. Yeah.
And it's true. It's like I don't have huge problems with fake it till you make it has positives too, right? Of like that not give up attitude of like, I know I can do this and I will figure out how. I think that that's great too in a lot of circumstances. It's more just like the being upfront about all these things and that stuff, that like, so it's a little bit of give and take. And there are situations too where like you got to leap and you got to do. It's not like saying I don't know isn't an excuse to give up.
No,
it's an excuse to do more.
That's right. And you can still be ambitious and entrepreneurial and also say that you don't know. Those things can they're not mutually exclusive, are they? So yeah. Can I ask maybe one last question of you?
Of course.
Like how have your expectations changed throughout the course of your career, working at ILM, moving into Netflix, and now being in the role that you're in now? I guess your career expectations, how have you found that journey?
It's been great. Honestly, I feel like I've gotten a lot of opportunity to learn about a lot of different things. Starting, on the production side, working project to project, and doing those things. There's so much that I love about that, and that you have finished products that that have a timeline and deadlines, and there's a lot of structure and a lot of great in that. There's a lot of bad in it too. There's a lot of tight deadlines that force you to not do your best work, and a lot of different things around that. What I found, moving to the role that I'm in now, is that it's a different type of pressure. It's the work that I do is a lot longer term, and a lot more open-ended, in that we're looking at new technologies. We're researching what could be best for the future of the content that we make. And there's a lot riding on those decisions sometimes, and the work that we choose to do in our team. But I've never met a group of people so smart and qualified. And that's been one of the amazing things about coming to my current role, is this team. And I think that that's important wherever you kind of land, is like if you move around your career, and you enjoy the people that you're working with and you're learning from the people that you're working with, I think that you'll have success. There's a lot of different jobs, and a lot of people like different jobs for different reasons and different structures for different reasons. But I think a lot of people would say the core of that, it's the people that you work with and the work you get to do. And it's those things sort of jive for you. The studio structure is a lot different. Working on like the side that's making the owning the content and then distributing the work out, and getting to work on the side of like working back sometimes with ILM on some projects and getting to talk to some of my old colleagues, but from the Netflix side, it's different. Working with a lot of software vendors now on what they're doing next on their things, working with camera technology and display technologies, and talking to the manufacturers of these, of that, what they've got coming down the line, and what the next things are going to be, so that we can be prepared for what's going to be the best for the productions. It's very different, but it has this, there's a lot of people depending on us to put out the next thing and to keep up with that and to keep up with those trends. So there are different kinds of deadlines that, different people jive with different stuff, but I've very much enjoyed sort of bringing a lot of these technologies that I know are going to benefit a lot of people in their work that they do, and seeing those get used on productions, even if it's like a year after I finish working on it, is really, really cool. So
that sounds just like a wonderful fusion of, creative and technical disciplines to me. It sounds like a really exciting role, where you can kind of move back and forth between, slightly different, I guess, fields of expertise. Like, there's just no other role like it that I can think of. So that's
really, I had no idea that it existed, honestly. So that's the other thing too, is you make of it what you want to a certain extent. Sure. But yeah, and the other cool thing is that now I'm really excited to be connected to you, because I'm probably going to bug you to test things and do,
oh yeah, please
out.
do. I'd love to.
Yeah, and so that's like a lot of these things too, is that I get to work with awesome people like you that give me honest feedback about the work that we're doing, and we wouldn't be able to do the work that we do without that. So
that's awesome. And that's, I guess, a really great, segue into, I think, what would be a great thing to finish on is, I guess, how important networking is. I'm a huge believer in that, and it's really been what's made my career, is networking with people in the industry, and, starting out early, being willing to volunteer on projects and really branch out and build my networks, and then as time goes on, you obviously don't want to be volunteering forever, but I think that's a really great place to start, and also a way to sustain your career into the future, is to kind of continue to make lots of great connections.
Yep.
How do you feel about it? How has it helped your career?
It's been, it's huge, right? Like I talked even in the beginning about it, like I got my first job from my college professor, and that it's a form of networking, right? Mentorship is a form of networking. Your friends are things, and like people think of networking and it gets this kind of like negative sort of, it's sort of fake kind of thing, as people just do this to do it, and like it's how big is your network kind of deal. And I like to, there is that kind of networking if that's what you do, but I found networking to be much smaller scale and much more purposeful. I think the more that you can do that, and it's about, those genuine connections that you make, and following up with that, and making sure that both people in these, or both companies, or whatever it is, and whatever you're networking with are mutually benefiting from that networking, is the goal, right? That networking goes both ways. Just like a friendship goes both ways. And if you can keep that in mind as you're networking of what do I want out of this, but also what can I give, I think you'll get a lot of benefit from that networking. So
it's great.
I may mentor somebody, but they're also mentoring me as a mentee. Like I learn so much every time.
Beautiful. And I think to piggyback off what you're saying there, I think it's really good to approach networking in a general sense of, putting yourself out there, going to events and conferences when the world starts to open back up again, but don't put too much pressure on one specific individual or one specific company. It's just about, I guess, relaxing into it and, getting your name out there and linking up with people. And quite often you won't have direct control over how, you know, a particular relationship might go, but just, you know, expanding your networks in general is a really, really good thing for you, whether it be soon or whether it be a long way in the future. It's great to just know lots of people. So, and I think the Blue Collar Post Collective looks great too. And I must confess, I'm not online much, but you know, looks like an amazing place to network as well.
Yeah, and I'm kind of a similar of like everything that I've seen out of Blue Collar Post Collective and other organizations like it. These groups that are set up to give you that safe space to talk and to learn and to meet people, and they put on amazing events, and they're doing things like hopefully people want to listen to us talk for whatever reason. Hopefully it's useful, and it's useful for me just to get to talk to you. But there's things like that around that, and Blue Collar Post is a great example of the work that they do. My colleague Kylie is hugely involved in the Los Angeles chapter, and seeing the events that happen and do these things has been really awesome for me. And so hopefully eventually I'll get involved more once the world is something, you know.
Absolutely. Well, I hope, you know, like you, it's just been a pleasure, a real treat to chat to you. And I hope that, you know, well, I know that it's been worthwhile just in that, but I also hope that other people can get something out of it. And I just want to give a shout out to my colleague who put me in touch with you, Crystal, because she'll be doing the great work of cutting out the bad bits, hopefully. We'll see. I thought it was pretty good though. So yeah, no, it was really great to chat to you, Carol, and love to stay in touch. If I can help with any testing or anything, definitely let me know.
You'll be on the list now.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You have a great night. See ya.
Bye.